"Are you new here, and are you going against us?" Daryl shouted, springing up in front of the entire class. The female teacher, Madame Keita, was still in her first class, writing a note in her notebook. Her voice was muffled, but clear. "I am not against anyone. But there must be respect in the classroom." Daryl laughed and then turned to his classmates. "Did you hear that? She just got here and is lecturing us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Like and comment, please. This motivates us a lot." At that moment, Zola's voice was heard from the back row. It was calm but firm. "You can't talk like that. She's a teacher." There was a brief moment of silence. Daryl slowly turned to Zola, his face twisted into a mocking expression. "And who are you? The new loser. Are you trying to lecture us?" Then he beckoned his friends with a hand gesture. The gang moved. "Let's see how long our new hero's courage will last." The first punch landed on Zola's shoulder, followed by a kick to his knee. Zola staggered to the ground but did not retaliate. The class had fallen silent. Only the echoes of footsteps could be heard. Zola's vision was starting to darken, but he patiently resisted. When the morning sun hit the yellow buildings along the coast of Abidjan, everything in the wealthy plateau neighborhood shimmered with a golden hue. Amidst patio villas, high walls, and gated streets, a group of young people in white uniforms walked towards the buses. That day marked the beginning of the new term at the Collège de Lumière, and one student would walk through these corridors for the first time. His name was Zola. He was 17 years old. He was the middle child of a hard-working and honorable farming family from the interior of Ivory Coast. His father, Kofi, was a quiet and honest man who lovingly tended to his land. His mother, Adama, was a strong woman who worked in the fields while lovingly taking care of her 3 children. His older sister, Aicha, was preparing for university to become a teacher, while his younger brother, Kevin, was still in middle school. Their home was modest but filled with peace. They woke up early in the mornings, prayed, and went to the fields or school. Zola woke up every morning at 5 a.m., fed the animals in the garden, and then rushed to the local training gym. He practiced both taekwondo and boxing, aiming not only to be a sportsman, but also the pride of his family. He had made a name for himself in martial arts. His eyes were set on the 2028 Dakar Youth Olympics, and he never forgot the promise he made to his coach. "I won't return without gold." But Zola didn't want to be recognized as an athlete or a hard-working young man at this school. He just wanted to be a normal person. When Zola's family moved to the city center last month, he was accepted into this school with a scholarship. The majority of the students were children of diplomats, CEOs, and politicians. They arrived and departed in luxury cars, carrying a false sense of confidence in branded clothing. Zola, on the other hand, arrived by minibus every morning, spending his days quietly reading a book in a corner. However, there was not only luxury in the school, there was a gang called Beshli, a clique that terrorized the students, where even the teachers dared not speak up, writing their own rules for the school as they pleased. And their leader was Daryl, the governor's son. Daryl was a big, well-dressed guy whose every word was applauded, but who made those around him tremble with each glance. Teachers would think thrice before giving him a grade, and students tried not to step on his shoes. The other 4 were like satellites orbiting around Daryl: Jerome, the son of a media mogul; Mathis, the son of an oil company executive; Leo, the son of a diplomat at the French embassy; and Kayem, the child of a local TV star. As Zola walked down the corridor on the first day, he witnessed the laughter of this gang, the victims' photos plastered on the walls and fearful looks. In that moment, a voice within him rose. Stay invisible. For now. But sometimes staying in the shadows was not possible, especially if someone had noticed you. Zola and Daryl were in the same class. Zola usually sat quietly in the back of the class, taking notes without making eye contact with anyone. In the first few days, Daryl behaved disrespectfully towards the literature teacher, Madame Keita, erasing notes she wrote on the board to write his own sentences, filling the class with laughter. The teacher remained silent while the other students turned their heads away. Zola, too. He stayed silent. He just watched. He gritted his teeth but didn't move. 3 days went by like this, until one morning, when Daryl walked into the class with a plastic water bottle. When the teacher began the lesson, Daryl threw the bottle to the ground, stood up, raised his voice, and began to accuse the teacher with insulting words. Then suddenly, he walked toward her. He attempted to push the teacher with his hand. At that moment, Zola stood up. His chair tipped over. The class was plunged into silence. As he approached Darrell, his eyes seemed to be on fire. He said nothing. He grabbed Daryl's arm, twisted it, and quickly hurled him against the back wall of the class. When Daryl fell to the ground, he was breathless. For the first time, fear was evident in his eyes. Zola silently sat back down in his place. He only said one sentence. "You don't raise your hand against women. Not here. Nowhere." The class was silent. Madame Keita looked at Zola with tear-filled eyes. That day, for the first time in the school, someone had not stayed silent against Beschli. The next morning, Zola and Madame Keita were called to the office of the principal, Mr. Bamba. A heavy silence filled the room. Mr. Bamba sat behind his desk, hands clasped, scrutinizing them with a serious expression. "Zola, your behavior yesterday was unacceptable," said the principal. "Violence is not a solution at school. This is against the rules of discipline." Madame Keita stepped forward. "Mr. Bamba, Darrell was about to attack me. Zola simply protected me. If he had stayed silent, the consequences could have been much worse." Zola also raised his head. "I didn't start a fight. I only acted to stop someone's boundary. If I am to remain silent, I will. But I cannot be expected to see such violence and do nothing." Mr. Bamba took off his glasses, wiped the lenses with a handkerchief, but said nothing. The silence thickened. Finally, he only nodded and buried himself in his paperwork. As Madame Keita and Zola headed for the door, the silence in the room trailed behind them. As they walked down the hall, they both knew there was no turning back. At recess, however, Beschli intensified their bullying against Zola and Madame Keita. Zola's locker was constantly vandalized. His belongings were thrown on the ground, and some students quietly withdrew from the corridors he passed through. Madame Keita had also become the target of whispers in the teacher's lounge. However, that day, one of the most popular girls at school, Maëlle, broke through the crowd and approached Zola. Her curly hair fell over her shoulders, she wore her school uniform with confidence, and her eyes held a curious but warm expression. "Hi Zola, I'm Maëlle," she said with a smile. "May I sit next to you?" Zola was stunned. Having been so used to loneliness, he didn't expect such interest. Maëlle began to talk to him, and they sat together in the cafeteria. And from that moment on, everything changed. Because nobody knew that Darrell had liked Maëlle for years. She was the only one he couldn't draw to him. And now Maëlle was talking to Zola with a smile. One day in the schoolyard, they were chatting, under the shade of a large almond tree. Maëlle was laughing, and Zola was slightly nodding in response. Just at that moment, Beschli appeared. Darrell's eyes sparkled with anger. With a gesture, the other four surrounded Zola. "So now you're playing the hero by hitting on a girl," said Jerome with a mocking tone. Zola said nothing, but his eyes were sharp and attentive. The first punch came from Matis, followed by a shoulder shove from Leo. Zola only went into defense. With his fighting reflexes, he was lifting only his arms, dodging, but he absolutely did not retaliate. Because he knew very well that if he responded, he could seriously injure them. And that was when he could really be expelled from school. Mel screamed as she tried to intervene. "Stop it! Enough already!" she shouted. But two girls next to Leo grabbed her by her arms and pulled her away. "If you help him, you'll end up the same way," one whispered. "If you defend Zola, even your father won't be able to keep you in this school," the other said, leaning towards Maëlle. Just before Zola fell to the ground, he jumped back. He was out of breath, but he still hadn't thrown a punch. He was just trying to stay on his feet. At that moment, Mel's eyes filled with tears. Looking at Zola, she felt just one thing: admiration and helplessness. The next day, Zola was again called to Mr. Bamba's office. This time, Daryl was present with him. Daryl spoke with a victimized expression in his eyes. "Mr. Bamba, this child has reached dangerous dimensions. He attacked me. He should be expelled." Zola took a deep breath. "I didn't attack anyone. I defended myself. I defended against 5 people and didn't throw a single punch. That was the reality." The principal remained silent once more. Daryl's complaint was formally accepted, and it was announced that a disciplinary board meeting would be held concerning Zola. A few minutes after Zola and Daryl left the room, Maëlle quietly entered the principal's office. Zola still didn't know she was the principal's daughter. Maëlle's eyes held anger, but her voice tried to sound calm. "Dad, put an end to this nonsense. I saw with my own eyes. Zola didn't attack. He was attacked." Mr. Bamba stood up from his chair. "Maëlle, don't get involved in these matters. Keep your distance from your classmates." The girl struggled to hold back her tears. "I'm your daughter, but I also know the truth. You must defend justice. It's not just an office. It's about honor." The principal paused for a moment. His daughter's words filled the room, but he did not respond. At that moment, Maëlle felt her trust crumble inside. With teary eyes, she turned and left. For the first time, she felt not justice, but fear in her father's chair. Zola was given a 3-day suspension from school. During this time, he entirely dedicated himself to the gym. The training intensified as he punched the punching bag in silence. Someone was watching him from the corner of the gym. The minister of youth and sports of the country. After watching one of those training sessions, the minister asked the coaches about Zola. The coaches excitedly shared his achievements, discipline, and silent determination. The news reached the principal quickly. Mr. Bamba received a phone call one morning and learned that the minister was personally looking into Zola's situation. A few days later, Zola walked back through the school gates. The hallways were still cold, but now the eyes turning toward him were filled with a different attention. Maëlle approached slowly. Shadows fell under the trees in the yard. There was no longer the usual confident smile on her face. Instead, there was a shy warmth. "Zola," she said softly, a tremor in her voice. "Seeing you here again, it's really nice. You know, I feel more honest, more real when I'm with you. Whenever I see you, I want to tell you about myself." Zola looked into her eyes without breaking gaze. At that moment, he felt something change beyond words. Zola paused for a moment. Then he spoke gently. "I didn't really tell you about myself. Actually, I'm on the national team in martial arts. I'm preparing for the Olympics. I hid my identity in this school. I had to stay silent." Maëlle did not look away. "I also need to tell you something. The principal, Mr. Bamba, is my father. I've kept that from you for a long time, but I wanted to be honest now." Zola nodded slightly. "You don't need to apologize. Maybe he had his justifications. Everyone carries different burdens. You did the right thing. That takes courage." At that moment, they both understood each other's silent battles a little better. A few days passed. The schoolyard was crowded again. Madame Keita was walking towards the cafeteria with her books tucked under her arm after class. Just then, the Beschli blocked her path. They surrounded her. Darrell approached with a calm expression. "What were you teaching in class again, Keita?" "Heroism. Lies about how the weak can stand?" said Jerome in a mocking tone. "There shouldn't even be a voice for people like you in this school," said Leo, standing in front of the teacher. "Just because they call you teacher doesn't mean we have to respect you." Madame Keita squinted her eyes and tried to stand tall. "I don't ask for respect from you, but I at least expect you to behave like human beings. Humanity is not just a title." Matisse, the crudest of them, let out a laugh. "Are you still trying to scare us with your humanity?" Then suddenly, he lunged forward and slapped the teacher in the face. The crowd in the courtyard held their breath. At that moment, Zola saw what was happening from the far corner. He started running. His heart was pounding with anger. This time he wouldn't wait. This time he wouldn't stay silent. He pushed through the crowd and moved towards them. His eyes glowed like coals in the darkness, neither speeding up nor slowing down. He approached like a shadow. The silence hung over them like the calm before a storm. "Enough," he said, his voice neither loud nor quiet, but resonating throughout the courtyard. Zola stepped in front of the teacher. He opened his arms. "You can't get past her." But the kids hesitated for a moment, yet remembering the time they'd brought Zola down, they launched their attack. Mathis kicked Zola in the ribs. Leo tried to unbalance him with a shoulder shove. Zola staggered back 2 steps but did not fall. His face was still expressionless. At that moment, Maëlle rushed out of the crowd. "Don't do it! Leave him alone!" she shouted, running to Zola. But Darrell, in a fleeting moment of anger, turned to Maëlle and pushed her away with an open hand. The young girl fell to the ground, startled by the pain of a slap on her cheek. At that moment, Zola's vision darkened. No one could hold him back now. In an instant, he took Leo down. Then with one swift motion, he threw Mathis to the ground. Kayem tried to flee, but Zola caught him and pinned him down. Daryl tried to resist, but Zola expertly locked his arm and brought him down. The crowd was frozen. Zola took a deep breath, then began to gather the fallen books one by one. He gently touched Madame Keita's arm, then turned to Maëlle and helped her up. He wrapped his arms around both of their shoulders and without saying a word with glances, he led them away from the crowd, carving a path through the yard. No sound could be heard except for the sound of their steps. At that moment, everyone learned what silent justice looked like. "No one will hurt. You again, ma'am," he said quietly. Immediately after the incident, Darrell and his friends rushed to the principal's office. As usual, they were speaking loudly, complaining about Zola. However, this time, things were different. Mr. Bamba stood up from his desk, opened his file, and looked at Darrell over his glasses. "Enough is enough," he said. "The patience of this school has run out. You have all been referred to the disciplinary board. You will receive the necessary punishment." 2 days later, a notice pinned at the entrance of the school caught everyone's attention. The Beschley gang had been suspended from school for a week. But on the same day, the news also spread that Mr. Bamba had been removed from his position as principal. Zola could not endure this injustice. He reached out to the Ministry of Sports and explained everything that had happened. The minister came to the school to see the situation for himself. After the investigation, he made the following announcement. The actions of the 5 students were not just an individual outburst, but threatened the peace, security, and values of the entire school. Bullying is not about crushing the weak, excluding the different, or silencing them. Bullying is the most dangerous silence of a society. The disciplinary board examined these behaviors from all angles and decided on the expulsion of the students from the school. At the same time, Mr. Bamba, who had not lost his stance during this process but had been removed under political pressure, was also reinstated in his position as principal. It was determined that the governor had also misused his authority during the investigation and was suspended from his position by the Ministry of the Interior. This decision represents not only a sanction for the students, teachers, and parents, but also an example that decisive action against bullying is possible. Turning to Zola, who was quietly waiting in the yard, he smiled. Justice sometimes takes time, but it comes. Madame Keita took a few steps forward and stood in front of Zola. Her eyes were filled with tears, but there was a soft pride on her face. "Thank you, Zola," she said. "You are not just my student, you are like my brother now, and I am proud of you." Zola bowed his head, closing his eyes in gratitude. At that moment, Maëlle approached. She came gently to Zola's side, looked into his eyes for a moment, and then hugged him with strong determination. "I love you," she said quietly. Zola's lips slightly moved. He extended his hand and held Maëlle's hand. Their palms clasped together, like 2 hearts that had been silent for years but had finally heard each other.